Think the economy hasn't gotten bad enough? Well, think again. Right now, it looks like someone has nuked the world of finances. The last few months have seen some of the biggest losses in history. Debt is at record highs, businesses can't afford rent, and bankruptcy is on the rise. Many economists have stopped saying a recession is coming. Instead, they're saying it's already hitting hard. Even Amazon's Jeff Bezos is sounding the alarm, saying Americans should prepare for the worst. But the narrative isn't the same in politics, with some world leaders acting like everything is just fine, which potentially risks the financial safety of their citizens. Long story short, the news is not good for the global financial system, and I know you've been hearing that a lot lately, but in order for us to be educated enough about how bad things might be in the future, we do need to look at the numbers and see what they are saying right now. So, are we in a recession, or is a recession coming, and how bad will it be? Well, let's have a look at the numbers and try to work this out together. Over the past year, over $46 trillion, that's a trillion with a T, has been lost from stock and bond markets around the world. This is a huge number, but especially massive when you compare it to the total losses of the 2007 to 2008 global financial crisis, the GFC. During the GFC, around $2 trillion was lost over a similar one-year period, meaning what's happening now is around 20 times worse, even adjusting for inflation. Next, Americans are currently in a record amount of debt. The gross national debt just crossed $31 trillion for the first time, and with credit card rates at record highs, fewer people can afford to pay back their loans, meaning delinquency and personal bankruptcy is already on the rise. When it comes to debt, possibly the scariest statistic is around mortgages. Wells Fargo just announced that new mortgages are down 90% in total, illustrating just how unaffordable it's become for most people to own a home. And for people who already have a mortgage, defaults are rising around the world, something being seen in Australia, the UK, Iceland, the US, and everywhere in between. Lastly, all this economic chaos is causing people to dip into their savings in a big way. As recently, the personal savings rate in the US hit a level of 3.1%, which is the second lowest it's been in recorded history. Think that's everything? Nope, definitely not, as the economic chaos continues into the business world.
But wait! There's more!
Right now, over a third of small to medium businesses in the US can't afford to pay their rent, with 37% of SMBs becoming delinquent in October. In Canada, that number is even higher, at over 40%. The industry suffering the most is the restaurant business, with nearly half of food service businesses unable to make rent last month. But the economy isn't just hammering small businesses, it's hitting the big guys as well. Amazon just made history for being the first company to ever lose $1 trillion in value, meaning that up to 10,000 people could be laid off from the company this week alone. The Zuck has personally lost around $100 billion of his own money, with Meta already laying off 11,000 people, or about 13% of its workforce. About the same percentage of Stripe's employees are already gone as well. Twitter's new owner Elon has just fired 50% of its staff, also saying the company could possibly go bankrupt if it doesn't get more cash. So obviously this looks really bad for individuals as well as companies. However, some politicians would like you to believe that you shouldn't be too worried, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But before I do, there's another set of bad statistics I want to talk about. One of the most tried and tested investment strategies in modern history is the 60-40 portfolio of stocks and bonds. And according to the Bank of America, it's down 34% this year alone. In other words, it's worst performance in 100 years. This has resulted in high net worth investors pumping more money into alternative assets, one of these being fine art, with a record-breaking art auction bringing in $1.6 billion just last week, according to CNBC, because the rich see art as perhaps a safer way to store value than stocks. Now, you might not have 10 mil just lying around so you can invest it in a valuable piece of art. However, you don't have to if you invest with Masterworks, the sponsor of today's video. Masterworks lets you invest in multi-million-dollar art at a fraction of the full price, and they're getting results even in these times of economic stress. Since talking about them just last month, they've sold 2 more paintings, first netting a 21.5% return for investors in October, and again for 17.8% just 2 weeks ago. This is why I've been talking about Masterworks for almost a year now, and and have personally invested in 4 pieces, including this Banksy, and most recently, this incredible artwork. If you want to invest alongside me with Masterworks, there is a waitlist to get in. However, if you click the link in the description, you will skip that queue and get priority access. Okay, so now back to the video. And this is where I have the biggest problem with this whole story. And it's the fact that instead of preparing their people for a serious recession, many politicians are acting like things are just not so bad, likely so that even in a small part, they don't have to take the blame for it. Most economists agree that we are in a recession, or at least very close to one that's likely only going to get worse as we go into 2023. And despite how bad things are already, the IMF just warned that the worst is yet to come. Jeff Bezos believes it's time to batten down the hatches. And even though his business relies on people consuming as much as possible, he's even advised people to hold off on larger purchases so that they can save money in the event they need it in a future looming recession. Most CEOs seem to share Bezos' statement, and according to NPR, they were hard-pressed to find even one who isn't bracing for a recession. So basically, everyone thinks things are going to get worse. That is, except for many in politics. Just a week ago, US President Joe Biden said that the US isn't anywhere near a recession right now, despite the fact that traditionally, a recession is 2 consecutive quarters with no economic growth, exactly like what the US has just experienced. Other world leaders seem to not be reading the signs either. The UK's new PM, Rishi Sunak, has suggested that the UK's economy is stable, despite the fact it almost completely collapsed just a few weeks ago, with British markets losing almost $500 billion not long before that. Obviously, this is a glaring problem in politics. Instead of just telling the people the damn truth about what's going on so that citizens can prepare, it's all just one big drama show, one where we are seldom told the seriousness of situations like this. So here's the big question. If we are in a recession and things are going to get worse in 2023, how bad could it actually get? Nobody can predict whether a recession will continue or whether or not it'll get worse. However, we can predict some of the outcomes if the world's economy continues to shrink or stagnate. Firstly, jobs will continue to be cut, and employees with the least value to any company will usually be the ones to go first. Obviously, this leads to general rise in unemployment, as well as a small overall rise in poverty. With less money floating around in the economy, consumer spending will drop, leading to businesses having less income overall. This will result in lower overall manufacturing and a shrinking of a nation's GDP. And technically, this is not all bad news. As interest rates rise and inflation drops, the price of goods and services will tend to decrease, meaning some of the price hikes we've seen over the previous 2 years will likely eventually mellow out. Now, normally I'd like to try to leave you with a solution of how you can prepare for what is coming, but we've already done that before. And there's a ton of free resources online about how to prepare for a recession if you want to educate yourself in that way. And so this time I want to leave you with a more sobering thought about the situation that we are in, one that is driven less by the mind and more driven by the heart. Whenever times of economic stress like this hit, it's easy to become focused on the numbers alone. Numbers like those that illustrate a rise in living costs and unemployment, or a drop in available jobs and GDP. It's so easy at this time to point fingers at corporations and politicians and saying it is all them, and I have hatred. And sometimes we lose sight of actually what is important, that at the end of each one of these numbers are very real human beings. People just like me and you. Hardworking humans whose jobs may get cut, leaving them without any kind of safety net. Families who may end up struggling for months or years and find themselves unable to provide for the children as well as they'd like. Some who may no longer be able to afford their mortgage payments, resulting in the loss of the roof over their heads. Or people whose savings, pension, or investments could get wiped out entirely because of the events outside their control. In short, none of these numbers are just numbers. It could even be happening to you watching this right now. The consequences we're facing are real, and they are being faced by real people. Yes, there is a financial cost, but there is also a very real human cost. Sometimes it's really hard to know what is happening for other people next to you, around you, because there's a facade that goes up pretending that everything's fine. But maybe there are some signs that you can just provide a little assistance without making it embarrassing. However, maybe it's also happening for you and you might need to reach out for some help. Just keep in mind that humans, we're made to work in communities, and we are going to get through this because we are the most resistant species. So whatever you can do to assist one another at this time is where it is at humanity. Let's bring it back to the heart. Thank you so much for watching. There is also a video on the screen right now talking about the financial leaders that have predicted the coming recession a lot earlier on. So if you wanted to watch that, there is a link on the screen right now. Otherwise, we have an amazing newsletter of over 75,000 people that are receiving extra financial nuggets wrapped up in beautifully written stories. There's a link in the bio for that. Also subscribe and comment. We'd love to have you part of this community. And finally, we do have a private membership for all things finance and freedom to help you on your journey of mastering the world of finance and freedom. There's a link in the bio, and I will see you in the next one.